Jesse,
Yeah.
season 4 is nearly here.
Season 4 is nigh.
We're about to review creative questions from our gamer audience.
We would love to hear from our gamer audience with their creative questions. What are they curious about? What do they ponder? What do they think is a good idea and want to know if we think is also a good idea?
Yeah, that's right. And look, we're about to start season 4. By the time you're listening to this, we have tons of emails, tons of questions, and they're all perfectly brief and eloquent and wonderful. But that doesn't mean we'll never do this again. And that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. So write us in at jauntymantis@gmail.com. Jesse, I have a question for you.
Why are you asking me a question?
Because this is a tabletop role-playing game podcast where gamers ask creative questions because these are curious gamers. This is the Jaunty Mantis podcast.
It is.
Yeah, in case you didn't know.
I feel ambushed. I thought we were just hanging out.
No, this is our weekly opportunity to record the kinds of conversations that my co-host Jesse and best friend and I have here on the Jaunty Mantis. And as a reminder, if you, our listener audience, have any creative questions of your own for these two curious gamers, send them to jauntymantis@gmail.com.
That's gmail.com. I was really feeling disappointed because of how often in my mind we've asked people to write in and then there's like crickets. And then I realized it's only like the last 2 or 3 published episodes where the messages have gone out. We're like, please write us questions.
Yeah. We record a little bit in advance. Jesse, I don't know if this is going to be my entry into season 4, because for season 4 it's all about taking questions from the audience, from our curious gamer audience, and I figured I would play a practical joke on us or more on you because I know what I'm doing, but write in a question related to something that happened to our gaming group recently where you were in the GM's chair, and I was just going to write it as a question. So whatever, this may be a bonus episode or this may be an official season 4, as if this is my listener question to you. Wow, that took way too long to try to make a joke out of. That didn't work.
I mean, yeah, that went over like a house on fire.
Holy shit. There's going to have to be some creative editing on that one. All right. So I have a question for you, Jesse.
I think I know the question. I was setting you up with a house on fire bit.
Yep. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
The question was, what happens when the party burns down your house?
Yeah. Okay. So backstory. We were near the end of the Rifts campaign, the Rifts mini campaign, which had a pretty decent arc of a little villain, a mystery, a town council, and then like the riding for vengeance against the vampire lord. Mr. Mondragon, Senor Mondragon, the rancher, at his hacienda. Beyond the mutant cactus forest. And so the party gets there, and like one of the techno wizard, I had reminded them they could cast spells. Like they didn't just have to use their vehicle, but I reminded them they could do that. And they're like, can we just cast a flame bolt at this house and burn it down? And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, it's the desert. The only thing the vampire's really worried about is rain. He's incredibly overconfident and cares more about style than substance. The idea that he would be attacked is utterly infallible to him. And also, fun thing I know that the party may have forgotten. Rift's vampires don't get hurt by fire until they're already decapitated, and then you couldn't have to burn their bodies. Fun thing the vampires didn't think of, if your house burns down and it's daylight, you're exposed to daylight. So they
killing them all.
Yeah, to try and run, and killed them all. And so instead of a tense encounter with Lupo and Oso Mondragon, the cousins, the wolf and the bear, and then Senor Mondragon himself, they just all died, and that was the end of the campaign.
Yeah. And I think this speaks to a larger question or a larger scenario that many of us who sit in the GM's chair are faced with, which is what happens when the party snaps their fingers and undoes all of your carefully laid plans, all of your work, or as much as or as little as that would be, or this great encounter that you had set up for them, and they just find a way to just neutralize it. And you're as the GM, you're kind of just sitting there like, well, great, I planned for them to go into this house and fight these vampires, and they came up with the idea to just burn it down to the ground. Do I let them do it and just go with it, or do I kind of, ad hoc it? Do I change things? Because what Jesse did is he let it happen. Our group of the PCs burned that fucking house down, and the vampires came out of it and died in the sunlight. I would not have done that. I would not have done that. What I would have done as a GM is I would have given them halvesies. I would have been like, huh, okay, that's really clever. And I didn't plan for this. And it seems like I should have planned for this. So is there a way that I can kind of, salvage some of it? Because I still really want to run the encounter. So what I would have done in your shoes, and this is not a criticism, because I love the way that you handled it, because I'm very much like it's a player first kind of situation. Like, the player's fun is the most important thing for me as a GM. But also running them through an encounter that I designed is really fun as well. So what I would have done in that situation is the house starts burning down, and then some of the vampires, including probably the boss and a sub lieutenant, they get into the basement and or the cellar and close a door, and then just wait for that moment in which the party decides to then stupidly come down to them and investigate, or the sun was going down, just wait and then come up, and if that's an easy fight, then so be it, because half of their numbers are gone. Or if they come out like, guns blazing, or I guess in this case, fangs barred, you know. So what I guess my follow-up question is like, what did you decide? Why did you make the decision that you did?
It was cool. Like, it was a cool idea. And so a couple things, like, as far as planning out the encounter, like for my Rifts prep, I didn't have a cool encounter planned. I had a floor map of a large, like, hacienda style house up on one screen. I had like a vague description of Lupo and Oso and the rancher that I was going to go with, and I had a simplified stat block, and it was just going to play out how it played out. My main move that I was going to do is try and have the vampires use their hypnotic powers to just defuse you and turn you guys into servants. It wasn't going to be a knockdown drag out by any means. Like, at least what I was planning on having them attempt. And I was like, this is a cool idea. It works. It makes sense with the story. It lets us like not stretch this into a whole other session that's just combat.
Right.
And it gets us a satisfying end to the campaign. It's a cool idea, and it lets people use the powers on their character sheet. And I mean, like, I think with a rulings not rules game, I think before running Rifts, I would have done the same thing that you did. Like your suggestion. I would have been like halfway, been like, they all got away and they're in the basement now, or like, no, of course this is an MDC structure. Like, they built a bunker, like,
right.
blah, blah, blah. And just like, no one has challenged the Vampire Kingdom seriously in like ever, actually, in Rift's Earth. So like, this dude's crazy overconfident.
Yeah. And so what is it that's different? Because you said before Rifts, you would have done it more akin to my way. Yeah. So what is it about Rifts that changed that?
Just rule it, like, just the freedom, because like I think I don't know if we talked about this in real life or if we talked about this on the podcast, but like,
probably both.
Yeah, we should record all of our conversations. And so yeah, I mean, it's just with Rifts, the rules being as poorly indexed, as simple as they are, but like, it's really hard to look something up if you really want to look something up. Case in point, when I got asked what like travel rations cost, and I had like no idea. And then we found it in the character description for saloon bum for your character.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, I'm like, oh, well, okay. 14 books in a paragraph for a character class is where you find the equipment table information for how much it costs to get a drink or a meal or rent a room. So with that, you just kind of like, it gives you the freedom, or reminds you, in my case, reminded me I always had the freedom to just roll with it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and just rolling with it is going to create the interesting story. I mean, I did get to set up when you did go into the basement. Like the basement was a last minute addition.
Right.
Like it was this because this was kind of the Alamo, which has no
Mm-hmm.
basement. There isn't
Mm-hmm.
a basement in the Alamo. Okay. Yeah, so it was a last minute addition. I was like, oh, well, what's down there? Oh, probably some ley lines connect. And there's a portal where they can get orders from their master in the Yucatan Peninsula and one of the pyramids. And let's have somebody see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why my character, because you had a little bit misremembered in the beginning. So my character was the character that suggested that we burn the house down. And my character is a saloon bum. And one of our players, Kurt, said, it kind of, he's like, there is kind of a justice to this decision that Jesse made, because the most useless character in the group came up with the idea, to end the encounter and win the day, right? Like that's kind of like, we have a character that has like a magical car and magic spells. We have like a gun-toting sharpshooter. We have a dog boy vampire slayer with like a cool whip and like tons of grit, and then who's like stabbing. What was he doing? He was like stabbing guys in between the plates of their mega damage armor to great
Yes.
effect. And
Yes.
it's like, what does my character do? Like his hands are shaking, so he starts drinking as he pulls up his gun to take a shot because he's scared out of his mind, right? So there, I felt some responsibility, because there's like, when I'm the GM and I'm playing, or I'm sorry, when I'm a player and I'm playing in another person's game, I don't know if you do this, you probably do. But I kind of try to take the responsibility of trying to be the best player ever, the player that I want at the table, because I know what it's like. So there was a part of me that was like, fuck, I shouldn't have suggested that.
No, I think to my view about the Rifts game, and I don't know that I would have this attitude about every game I ever run, but my view of the Rifts games is like, it is an old school experience. We're playing it for an old school experience, and part of that old school experience is having a clever idea that bypasses something. It's not about, in an old school game, and I'm not saying that modern games are about this. Um, but I think with 3.5, as it had such a rule for everything sort of rule set that I don't think I would describe as complex, despite our last bonus episode. Um, and then fourth edition had kind of a rule for everything. Fifth edition kind of has a rules for a lot of things. You know, like there's a tendency to just lean on the rules and the dice to decide everything that happens in the story. And that very much wasn't a thing was there when I started playing. And I think it's maybe a bad habit.
Mm-hmm.
In story games, when you lean into the mechanics, like any of the Powered by Apocalypse games, those mechanics are driving story in genre appropriate ways. And that's what those mechanics are written to do.
Yeah.
They're written to create something interesting with a chance of failure.
Mm-hmm.
The question they ask is, what's the most interesting thing that can happen if I fuck this up? And what's the most interesting thing that can happen if I succeed? And what's the most interesting thing that can happen if I kind of do it? Let's all talk about that. Okay, that's what happens. We go forward.
Yeah.
D&D is like, do I hit?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't make it a bad game. That doesn't mean you're not free to embody your character in D&D, but there is a tendency, and this happened last night when I was doing that thing that you were talking about, trying to be the perfect player, when I asked if I could make a specific roll and then was like, oops, can I walk that back? I mean, would I know? Like, I don't need to make a specific roll.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to me, Rifts gave me the freedom to move away from that, because there wasn't a rule for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And now I kind of want to do our next little mini campaign in the Palladium setting. I kind of just want to run a Palladium fantasy game.
Right on. Yeah.
Like with like a little like do some OSR dungeon, but with Palladium fantasy and just see what happens.
Hmm. I'm glad that you. So first of all, I totally want to do that game. I'm totally here for it. Uh, but what I wanted to say, because I think you brought up a very good point about how this is different in D&D, and D&D wasn't always that way. The earliest editions of D&D, because their rule books were written more akin to what we understand from riffs, and because we didn't have a surefire rule system for everything, or it wasn't the cleanest, most simple, straightforward version that we have today in 5e 2024. But so that spirit of just like go with it, make it work, be creative is kind of the origin story of creative role playing and story gaming. You know what I mean? And some of that has gotten lost. I can't tell you how many third edition games I've played where I want something to happen in the game, and there's some or multiple players at the table. We call them rules lawyers who are like, well,
Sorry.
actually, that's not how that would happen. When that house gets burned down, because vampires have this set of hit points and resistances or saving throws, they all have an opportunity to resist this and then could make two moves before they burn up and die. And when that comes up at the table, I don't do this, but I want to look at that person and go, why are you being a dick? Like, we're just trying to have fun here.
But I'm the person doing that at your table.
Not anymore, you ain't. I'll give you an example because you are at my quote unquote table currently. I'm running that 1 to 20 game that we've talked about in past episodes, 5e, D&D 2024. And I set up an encounter where I told the player characters, this encounter has a timer. I used the 3 T's from Index Card RPG, the threat, the timer, and the treats, right?
Yeah, I haven't, because we reviewed that book together. I saw that and I was like, well played. Well played, Clux. Well
Yes.
played.
So I informed the player characters. I said, in 4 rounds, a thing is going to happen. And the scenario was that there were these monsters that had gotten onto the road and they were attacking the caravan, and innocent people were, being attacked. And I said, in 4 rounds, if there are, at the end of round 4, if there's still monsters, they all the caravan people die. Like, those are the stakes, right? And we got to the point where the player characters did such an excellent job of containing the monsters and almost virtually eliminating that threat. But I stuck with it. I said, if we get, like, all those people are now huddled together, if one of those monsters gets through, all of them die. Like, it's just going to murder all of them. And I can't tell you how glad I was that I didn't have somebody at the table to be like, well, actually, they would not, whatever that monster is, it would not be able to take enough turns and do enough damage to kill even the weakest amount of characters, because you said there was 15 caravan members, so it's clearly impossible. And I think we would be able, it's like, shut up. Like, I just want to run this scenario. We don't need to do rules as written. Not everything has to go into a fucking formula. Like, it's a game of imagination, Brian.
Yeah. I mean, I did rules lawyer one thing.
What was that?
The spell.
Oh, yes.
Because it wasn't being used to its full effect. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not just the ground's difficult terrain. There's a serious nasty cost for the monsters and the half of the party you put in the spell.
Yeah, but that's different, though. That's not the same thing as far as I'm concerned.
Mm.
I don't have a problem with spells working the way that they're supposed to. What I have a problem with is when the GM identifies a part of the game that should be using more imagination than mechanics.
I just thought, like, having that there is a very clear stakes. I mean, it's a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, I think, post trophy, of like identifying the scene and you using the 3 T's, like threats, what is it? Threat, tactic.
It's threat, timer, and treats.
Yeah, threat, timer, and treats. Like I just thought like this is the thing he's doing. He's made it clear that this is the thing he's doing, and it makes this have more stakes and interesting. Why would I argue with it? Like
Mm,
maybe it's a big one that's different from the other ones that we've fought so far. Like maybe it gets one person bit, and because they're not brave adventurers, they fail that saving throw and they transform and start ripping into the people around them and it just chain react. I don't know, whatever. Who cares? It's his
yeah,
game. This made this fight interesting and have stakes.
yeah,
So roll with it.
yeah. And I want to do like a full follow-up episode on, hey, I used the following things from the books we talked about, and this is how well it worked. But I will say, like, anything would have happened, or I should say anything could have happened to get that result. Like that's not really the point. The point is like D&D combat. If you look at almost every edition, I can't speak for first edition and play it. I started playing with second edition advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And every edition I've played since then, second, third, fourth, fifth, combat always seems to go on for way too long and kind of devolves into this, as you described earlier. Like, I roll to attack, you missed or you hit. Cool. On to the next thing, right? So I wanted to make sure to use those thematic elements of, here's what's going on in the fight, here's what is at risk, and here's how much time you have to solve it. And I think that's how I'll run encounters moving forward, until my GMing days are done. So
Well, I hope it's a long time till that happens.
thank you. So yeah, have you ever aside from your Rifts game, you've got to have had other games that you've GM'd or played in where you've watched the carefully laid plans of the dungeon master or game master just go up in smoke because somebody came up with we cast grease down the declining passageway and then we all jump in the bathtub and like slide all the way down and we would do X amount of damage against all the orcs and oh look, they all died, something like that. That's kind of shenanigans people did back in the day.
No, I mean, like I would love for that to happen. That's actually awesome.
Yeah, but some don't though, right? Some GMs get pissed off about that kind of stuff, whereas you and I think it's hilarious.
Well, I think GMs who get pissed off about that kind of stuff are doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
I would agree.
if you're one of those people, shots fired. Sorry. I don't necessarily think you're a bad person. I mean, we are all, like fall short of the image of our maker. We are all flawed and have feet of clay.
Mm.
And you're doing it wrong. Like, and I mean, like the modern premise behind this is that be a fan of the PCs.
Mm-hmm.
Like the thing from Dungeon World, from many of the Powered by Apocalypse worlds. Treat your NPCs like stolen cars and be a fan of the PCs.
Mm-hmm.
Like they come up with a bathtub grease spell, battering ram, awesome. Little Amsterdam steals a limo and drives it into the troll bodyguard. Awesome. Yeah, we had to look that one up for like 30 minutes to figure out the damage, but it was still awesome.
That was part of the fun though.
Yeah, because Shadowrun, whatever. So yeah, I mean, just like for me personally, the way that I do prep when I'm running my own games is so loose
Mm-hmm.
that there really is no master plan for the PCs to derail. I'm half counting on them for the story.
Mm-hmm.
Rifts reminded me of that. I took that into my work Shadow Dark game where that's a thing that happens pretty regularly, just with lots of PC death.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just fun. I'm just like, let's see what happens. How can you derail this plan? Oh, that's a much better idea than what I had. And just, I think I needed to do something to give myself permission to get back to that style that I wanted to be at.
Mm-hmm.
As a DM, and Rifts was part of that deliberate effort. So I think the only way, in my opinion, if you're doing it right, that a PC can derail your game is by doing a no call, no show,
Mm-hmm.
or starting a Bale Avalanche 45 minutes before the game's supposed to start. Like those are the only ways you can disrupt my carefully laid plans.
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, I'm just kind of here for what we all do together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I don't
but
know. Is that too wishy-washy? Do I need to pin that down a
no,
little
no,
bit?
no. I got two things. One is that play to see what happens is like one of the core tenets
Play
of
to find out.
play to find out what happens, right? It's
Yeah.
one of the core tenets of like Dungeon World. That's where I first saw it. It's in the book, it's on the website. I'm sure if you ran into uh Sage Latora and Adam Cobalt, they would just shout it at you immediately, right? Like, and when you play to see what happens, you get the good and then you get the great. Like, what's the bad in that situation? That's the way I look at it. So
Yeah.
if you're upset that like your player characters, like I could see if you were frustrated that you put time and effort into something and then they just like knocked it out just like that. You know what I mean? I could understand some disappointment and frustration. But like in my opinion, there's no downside to playing to see what happens. And you you have to take into account that like um the players are going to feel really good about themselves because they came up with it, you know? But I guess my second point after that is, as you know, friend of the show, Chris, who loves the Forgotten Realms, he would remind you that, you know what? Uh, DMs are players too. So if you're a fan of the players, who's being a fan for you in that situation?
Well, I was being a fan for me in that situation, and I think Chris would probably say the same thing. Like he's being a fan for himself, because and that also goes back to the first part before play to find out, which is
Mhm.
ask lots of questions.
Right. Yes.
When I channel Chris saying the DM is a player too, Chris, who again loves the Forgotten Realms. Um, when I say that, like basically I'm talking about like what he does for prep is he says, I take what happened in the last session and he records them and listens back to them.
Oh, I love that.
And then says, what's the most interesting thing that could happen next? The most interesting for me. And then he throws that to the players and then lets the players go from there. So like for me, I kind of just like painting a word picture and reaction sometimes.
Mhm.
So, like getting to think about all the consequences of the house going up in fire, and then as it spread to the stables on the walls where all the wild vampires were sleeping, like
Mhm.
narrating them turning into bats to flee, and so a swarm of flaming bats erupts from the stable as the roof collapses, and then burned to ash in the sun, like falling to the ground.
Mhm.
And then Kurt's character going around and beheading all the little singed rat skeletons afterwards, like
Yep.
to make sure they didn't come back when night fell. Um, like that's where I was having my fun as a player too.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think that would be my suggestion to people if they're not, running the game wrong. Again, shots fired. Is that like just find when things get silly, just narrate it. Like, because that's what you're there for. Rule on it being silly. It's fine.
Mhm.
Rule on it being strange and unusual.
Yeah, and is it entirely possible that, because I've seen this happen, I've seen dungeon masters or game masters be like, "Well, there goes the rest of my adventure," or "There goes the rest of the evening." And you have said previously on this podcast that sometimes you put forth like a different persona or a different reaction than you normally would when inside you're secretly like, yes, you're like you're enjoying it. But you I think you've said that before on this show that you put forth like a response that's like, oh no, like there goes all my guys. But
Yeah,
inside,
no,
like you're
like
cackling with glee. So like go more into that. Like why do you offer a different response?
okay, so like when like a boss monster dies in 2 rounds of combat, I'll be like, oh, I'll look frustrated or something like that
Mm-hmm.
that thing. Yeah, I do that because it makes it more fulfilling for the players.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't actually have an adversarial relationship with any of my players. I don't think I do anyway. But like the perception that there is one there, they're just like, ah, we did it, haha, we foiled his plans. Because when you're the DM, people kind of merge you and the bad guys in the game. Like it happens,
Yeah. Yeah.
like uh,
As long as it doesn't get to like a King Joffrey level, I think I'm
yeah,
okay with it.
yeah. As
Like
long as I'm not like showing off my brand new crossbow to people, like
yeah.
it's
Like I don't remember his name, but the actor that played King Joffrey like had a really bad like life after that show because he was so convincingly horrible. Just such a great villain. He's an amazing performance as this character. And people apparently in real life would come up to him and all but like spit in his fucking face because he had done such a convincing job.
Oh
And
God,
I had heard a
how'd
rumor
it
that he had
go?
even
How'd it go
stopped
for
acting.
Ramsey Bolton? Like,
Yeah. So when you say that like people associate the GM with the monsters, that a part of me just kind of like shivers a little bit, like,
yeah, but
So,
just during the game,
mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
it just raises the stakes a little, lets them feel a little bit more sense of accomplishment. It's just one of those things like, curse. Like it's never like I'm mad at you players. It's like more of the like, next time, Gadget, next time. Like,
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite things is something adjacent to what we're talking about, which is, and I do this all the fucking time. If you've ever played in a game of mine, and something turned out to be exactly what you thought it was, chances are that's because you suggested it. And because one of the things I love most about being a GM is when I convincingly sell something in the story to the point where the player characters are like, I knew it was that guy. I knew we shouldn't have trusted him. And they're just like, they're so excited about it. And I'm just sitting there secretly in glee going, yeah, that's because when I introduced this character, and for some reason during my performance as this NPC, you were like, fuck that guy. I don't trust him. He seems shady. And I was like, it's just Tom. He's just the barkeep. Like, what did I do? But then I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm like, all right, Tom's a fucking bad guy. Here's how it happens.
see, that's why I really, really, really wish that I would have recorded the first couple sessions of the Dragonlance where I successfully
Oh
had
yeah.
them care about the NPCs and the town that they were in, because I was just like, nobody was suspicious of them. And like, I mean, these are people who've played with me for a decade. They would have every right to be suspicious of any NPC I potentially introduced to them, but they're like, oh, nobody's suspicious. Just recently, they found out that the leader of, like, our last session, the leader of the mercenaries, Cudgel, she's a dwarf who led these mercenaries that like helped defend the town so they could get everybody on boats and out before the dragon army fully got in and burned it all down. Cudgel and a couple of those troops survived, and they met them on the road, and they had this joyous reunion instead of being like, how did you survive? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, which is fine, because spoilers for any of my players who listen to the podcast, Louisa, Cudgel is not a bad guy. Cudgel is genuinely like a nice dwarf who was a friend.
Yeah.
Quiet, Carrie. Stop listening. So my wife just went, yay, because she plays in that game.
I love it. That then okay, so that kind of takes me, spur of the moment, because in my game, we talked about this on a past episode where we were incorporating your character idea into the pre-work for the game, and I have a character, an NPC, who I don't want the party to mistrust her at all. I want her to come across very genuine. I want there to be an inherent danger to her,
Is
but I
it
never,
Keisha?
yeah, I never want the party to think that she's trying to trick them, right? And
Yeah.
what I had tried to do was I wanted everyone to interact with this character separately in the way that I ran the first part of this game, and I purposely chose you first and incorporated. What I did was I had the it's a goddess. She encounters Jesse's character. They know each other from a previous adventure. And I tried to set that up so that if Jesse's character trusted her, then hopefully the rest of the players behind those characters would as well. And how do you think that went? Do you think we're off to a good start on that?
Yeah, I think they were cautious.
They should be.
Some
Yeah.
characters were more cautious than others.
Yeah, but
Uh,
knowing their backstory, they should be.
yeah, actually, everybody like everybody else in the party is like a paranoid person who's like on the edge of collapse, who's lost like a bunch of stuff and
Mm-hmm.
like been stripped of hearth and home and blah blah blah, and have a tragic backstory. And my character's just like, "Oh, I want to go see this magic cow." So
Yeah, the seed for Jesse's character was like, you've heard that there's a town that has a cow that does magic tricks. And
It's
you
someone
really,
who saw the cow was talking to the owner of the cow whose kid has been kidnapped and he's looking for help. And I was like,
yep,
oh, I can go help this guy out and see the cow. So
yep, yep.
joined a caravan on the road.
Yeah, every besides your character, every other player character has experienced some sort of immense loss that is harkens back to our um, one of our previous episodes about creating backstory for your character, creating a complicated character or an interesting character, and none of it is their parents were killed. Like it's none of that basic bullshit. It's all like chef's kiss to our gaming group. Uh like everybody came up with a really cool backstory for their character.
Is our new player a warlock?
I'm not going to answer that question.
I just know just from looking at the playlist, it got to the end. I'm like, I bet he's a warlock. Like,
I don't want to betray player confidence, Jesse. That's not who
okay.
I am as a
I'm
person.
in the campaign. I can just look at his character sheet.
Yeah, yeah, you could. So you should.
I'm doing it now. You'll have to cut this. Just kidding.
So, I'd like to wrap on kind of some, in the corporate world, they call this best practices. So forgive me for that. But what are some best practices that we could share with players that maybe they notice that their GM, their super encounter just got dusted, or that they've moved things around to make things more fun? If you're a player character and you notice this, like, what's a great way to kind of be a fan of the GM as a player? You know,
Oh,
what's a good way for them to express that?
I mean, like it all depends on how the fight's going. I
Mhm.
mean, and this is very particularly like I think there's an assumption here. A lot of times, the finale or the end of the big thing is a combat. Um,
Mhm.
I think if it's going bad, start telling other players to run and that you'll hold them. Um, if it's going really well for you in the party, I don't actually know how you salvage that as a fan of the GM. Like, I mean, a classic example, and I wasn't disappointed about this because I mean it was the rules and we were working within the rules, and the party had spent like I think 2 years of actual real life time preparing to face Strad von Zarovich. So when they defeated him in 2 rounds of combat before the bard could even make it into the room, I was
Mhm.
like, fair enough. Like even with legendary actions, layer actions, fair enough. They did it. They did the prep. They earned this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so I don't know how a player in that could have done something to be a fan. I don't have an answer for that question. Do you got any ideas?
I don't, you ever since you first mentioned, the sage advice of like remember that the GM is also a player, you know, I don't want to say this has been a one-way transaction because we have a great gaming group currently and everybody says thank you and and that's probably the best thing you can do as a player is thank your GM, right? But like it just occurred to me that like if the GM is being a fan of the 4 or 5 people at their table that are playing the game, like how can we kind of give some of that back?
You show up and you engage.
You should yeah, stay off your phone.
Like, yeah, stay off your phone, engage with the story, be conscious of turn taking. Like, I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Fair enough. Fair
I,
enough.
that's kind of, I'm like, I don't want it to sound bad when I say I don't have a lot of expectations for my players. But that's because the people I've chosen my group, the people I play with do great. Like they have fun, we all have fun together,
Hmm.
you know? Um, so yeah, I think just, be engaged,
Yeah.
like run with the stakes, offer up stakes of your own. That's the best thing you can do to say thanks to the DM is be like, hey DM, uh, I was created by this crazy wizard in Kalimsham and he's looking for me.
Hmm.
He's still looking for me. Okay.
Yeah. I echo those sentiments. Like the best thing you can do as a player is show up, be present, be engaged, stay off your phone. So,
It's
yeah,
just
I'm
like
down for
rules in
that.
a syllabus for like freshmen, like in college.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, if there's nothing else that we have to say on that topic, just as a reminder, if you have a creative question that you would like to ask us on the Jaunty Mantis, you can get in touch with us at jauntymantis@gmail.com. We probably have social media too, right, Jesse?
Yeah, we are on Twitter as Wanty Mantis, at Wanty Mantis. We're also on Threads, though I haven't checked that forever. So I guess that means technically we do have an Instagram, which has no content. And yeah, we're on TikTok, where I occasionally make TikToks.
TikTok's about what?
Okay, well, the other day, I've been noticing for a while they're doing some construction in this big lot next to my kid's school when I get out of the car, and it's called the company is called KROM, KROM, Erosion Prevention. So they have these green banners stretched between these wooden posts that all say KROM, Erosion Prevention.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I wonder if the KROM prayer music is on a sound on TikTok, and it was. So I just filmed that with the music and me going, KROM, hear my prayer, and if you don't, to hell with you. And that was it.
Perfect.
70 people liked it, and it's labeled as the Jaunty Mantis, so I don't even know. Like,
there you go. Well, look, you can certainly check out all of those things. And until next time, get out there and play some fucking role-playing games.
Yeah, play some fucking games or shit. I don't know.
Yeah, burn the fucking house down or something.
Wish we had the rights to use that song for our exit music. That'd be so perfect.